Do you remember back in the day when we had to print out our directions on MapQuest? Like we would print like 10 to 15 pages. But the thing is that you had to know what your starting point was. And then you had to know your ending point in order to get good directions. And then you were just hoping that there were no new roads or road closures. And if you were trying to meet somebody, if you're trying to meet up at a certain point and then drive like caravan together, or you had to put in detailed information. It's not like it is today where you're like, oh, let me send you a pen. Let me just give you an address. Well, we will meet at the Quick Trip, whatever. We had to have a lot more of the information before we even started. Now with the technology and with the GPS and with all of these tools, we actually don't need to know where we are in order to get to our destination. But can I tell you something? Can I tell you that to get a life that you want, to get the fulfillment you're looking for, to make the impact that you desire, you actually need to know your starting point. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Today, we are diving into this whole idea of you need to get real with yourself. I have been doing this. I actually realized that I've been a coach for almost 5 years now. And I've been through a lot of different iterations of there's the technical term. And if you're an entrepreneur, you like the words like, what's your niche? What's your copy? What's your market? Well, all of these things. But the one thing that's been true for me throughout every step of the journey, no matter who I've served, there's this underlying thread of purpose. There's this underlying thread of self-awareness and understanding how you're wired. And so as I was thinking about what should I talk about today, I wanted to talk about the reason why. So I'm going to talk about it in two parts, is because when we understand ourselves, we then know the path that we need to go on. But also there's a lot of reasons why in this day and age, it's so crucial that we have an anchor, that we have a starting point. And I spent the whole last month talking about vision, and that's very much related to you. But I want to talk today about what it means to get real with yourself, to know what your strengths, what your weaknesses, what your blind spots. You're like, Tami, if I knew my blind spots, they wouldn't be blind. Yes. And we can still understand our core motivations, our core avoidances, and we can put up some blocks, some guardrails to protect us from our blind spots when we know them. We have to get real with ourselves. It's so interesting. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were discussing AI, and I found it fascinating that there are over 1,700 podcasts now that are completely driven by AI. The host is AI, the content is AI, the editing and all, every aspect of the podcast is AI. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is fascinating to me. And in this world of AI and how most people won't even know that it's not a real person. There's a real likeness, and it might even be, they're talking about how it's even like a real person, their avatar, their character that they pumped into AI, and then now the AI just acts as them. And it's a scary thought and a really weird thought. And to let you know, I'm not AI. This is really me. And how you know that is because I make mistakes. How you know that is because I go on tangents. And this is, I will flub up words. I get my train of thought gets lost. With AI, that doesn't happen yet. One day they might actually know, okay, every 4.5 seconds, Tami messes up a word. So let me go ahead and do that for her. But for right now, that's not it. In this day and age where we crave authenticity, we crave it. And so many business owners, so many women are like, I just want to be myself. And I was like, okay, so who is that? I don't know. I feel like I'm bluffing my way through life. I feel like I have imposter syndrome. I don't know what makes me unique and why I'm good at what I do. And so that's why it's so crucial, is because in this day and age where there's so much fake, so much fabrication, so much AI out there, artificial intelligence, so much artificial, we're craving that authenticity. And without knowing where we're starting, we can't have that authenticity. We need to be like MapQuest. We need to put in our beginning point so that way we can get to the destination that we want to go to. Without knowing our starting point, the chances of ending up somewhere unintended is like 100%. Not quite. Maybe, wait, God can direct our path so we can get there. Let's only say it's, 95% chance that you're not going to get to where you want to go if you don't know where you're starting. I work with so many business owners who are like, I've had success and I'm not experiencing that. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. And it's like, well, I don't feel like I deserve it. I had success when I was in my corporate job, and now I don't feel successful. I haven't done anything to be successful in this. And it's like, okay, well, let's go back to the core of who you are. Let's talk about what makes you you, because you are the most successful at being yourself. And so I wanted to break down and just these 3 concepts for you of why understanding ourselves is really our secret sauce. This is where our unique value proposition, this is where our zone of genius comes from. You may be good at doing the things, but why and how do you do them? That's the genius part behind it, because there's nothing new under the sun. There's thousands of people who do the same 1,000 things. And what makes you different? And it's you. That's the answer, is you. You are different. Your unique gifting, your unique strengths, your unique perspective, the experiences you've had that have added layers of depth to you. And so first is this getting real with yourself is the foundation to authenticity. Authentic in general is like real, true, essence, like the real deal. And if we don't start with the real you, then we're not going to have that foundation of authenticity to build on. Figure out what you want and then go from there. And so I was researching, I was looking at how can I describe, because we're layered. And so I was thinking of these 3 layers of a mirror. So there's the first layer, that's the surface layer, where this is what other people see. This is the outside appearance. This is your outward habits. Your outward habits. This is the things, the behaviors and the results of the behaviors. That's what others can see, and the strengths that others are able to point out in you. Also the weaknesses and the negative side of it as well. Okay. Then there's the layer 2, the reflective side. So this is typically where we stay. We stay in this side because it's what we see when we look within. So this is what we see in ourselves. And it has our fears, some values. It is our inner narratives, which are in our beliefs. These are the stories that we tell of ourselves, or that we speak to our own hearts. Again, there's level here that it is not necessarily true. This is this reflective portion is what we want others to see or not see. But we stay in this by just looking on a somewhat shallow level of who we are. And a lot of times we stay here because we're afraid of what happens when we go deeper. We all make mistakes. We all fall short. We all have missteps. We all have things in our past that so I don't have regrets typically, but there's things in my past that I'm like, okay, I don't need to actually talk about them or bring them up. There's things in my past that they can stay in the past. Okay. So even if you don't have a regret about it, we all done stupid things. All right. But this reflective layer is who we see ourselves through those stupid things we've done. The beliefs that we hold based on what our comments from other people, our core avoidances, and this part of us that wants to be safe and loved and belong. And then there's the third layer of this, which is the true essence, the core of what makes you unique. This is the core. This is the inner being of how God wired you, of who you are, this unique person who, when you own her, when you are like in touch with your true essence, then that's like true authenticity. And this is where your purpose, your faith, your values, this is the why you do what you do. This is the essence of like, you don't have to strive to be here. You have to strive to get to this point. You have to be willing to do the work to get to the true essence. But in this layer, you just get to be you. And this is where we want this surface layer and this reflective layer to align and to show, to reflect this true essence layer. We need to go 3 levels deep. We need to ask ourselves the hard questions that are actually quite simple. It's just hard because we're afraid of what is going to be said, what we reveal. And it's because of the fears and the beliefs that we hold that are not true. It's the ones that are meant to keep us safe. It's the ones that say, you know what? You'll never be as successful as you are when you work for me. You'll never be able to do this on your own. You're never going to be able to take your skills and transplant them into another industry. You're always going to wish you worked for so-and-so. You're always going to wish you were in this relationship. You know what I'm saying. There's that, and these beliefs that we hold and these thoughts and these lies and stories that we tell, the inner narrative that we play will block us because God knows and the devil knows that our true essence is right below that. And when we know who we are, when we know our starting point, we can start working towards our destination. We can start working on that purpose that God's placed in our heart and the impact that we want to make. And so it's so crucial. It's vital. It's necessary. And it's worth going to that third layer. And so the next part of that is the getting real with yourself. Number 2 is the power of knowing your blueprint. So when I built this house, and I say I built, meaning that I hired the right people to do it. But the first thing we did is we created a blueprint. We talked to an architect who understood and could take what I wanted, and he could create the blueprint. So it didn't have colors, it didn't have fixtures, but it knew where they needed to go, and it knew what needed to happen in order to get them there. It knew, like for the laundry room, that it needed hot and cold for water available, and I needed a sink in there. And so it knew, and structurally it knew I needed, I mentioned that I needed cabinets. And so the architect created the blueprint. When we start to really look at who we are, when we get real with ourselves, we create a blueprint. And that blueprint we can use as a guide for our life, for the visions that we create, for this God dream, because we don't have to fear putting this dream and the blueprint together because it comes from the same source. And then this leads into number 3, which is the decision-making compass. When we know us, we now have a framework to make decisions, that we know our true essence. We know what our values are. We know what our faith is. We know what our purpose is. We know the impact we want to make. We know what we're strong at. We know what our gifts are. We know what our talents are. We know what steals our energy and what gives us energy. We know ourselves to the core, the true essence of who God created us to be. That was a mouthful. When we know this, decisions are a lot easier because is it on the blueprint? Is it part of who I am? Yes, go forth and conquer. No, as in no, it actually butts up against one of my values. Okay. It may not be a no right away, but it's like, how can we make this work? Or should we make this work? And so by asking ourselves and getting real with who we are, It enables us to grow and to soar so much faster. The success that we want is right at our fingertips. But when we crave authenticity and we want to be true to ourselves, we want to be aligned. Like, how many times have you felt like I'm just misaligned? I just don't feel like I'm who I am and what I'm doing is connected. Well, when you put together the true essence with what you're doing, that's when you can see why it's misaligned. And it might just be a few little shifts. Doesn't mean you need to quit your job, but maybe you need to look at your job as, okay, what impact am I making in this job, in this, collecting data for, you know, Acme ABC, like whatever. It may not be a job that really lights you up. However, you can see why you're there and what you can do while you're there. And what you can see what by doing this, and which is what I'm really good at, this comes a little easier for me. So I can focus on this that I'm passionate about, that I can get uncomfortable and work at a little bit. So you can balance that. Doesn't mean you need to quit when something doesn't align. It means that we get to step back, see what aspects, and then get real with ourselves. Some of the questions that you can ask is, what am I willing to do here? Am I willing to stay in this job that I don't really love because it's paying the bills? I'm good at it. It's easy. And so I can find fulfillment in other areas. It gives me the space to create something of my own. Or do it goes directly against my value. I was wondering why it was so difficult to show up every day. And when you got clear on, well, it goes directly, it's a force against a core value you hold. Maybe your boss is not someone who has integrity, and therefore you go knowing you don't know to trust them or not. Well, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to have the conversation? Are you willing to quit and so that way you can? The right answer is there for you if you already know your true essence. One of the things, like, as I talking about these, like, I've started creating these, like, looking at all of the things I've done and, like, what are the 10 rules that helped me get to where I am? And this is the first one that is like, no, get real with yourself. As soon as I got real, I had a great job. When I first started coaching, I actually worked for a financial company. I was a contractor for them. And I got to do aspects of what I love. I helped them set up life plans. So we talked about, what do you want to do with your money? And what they would do, they would send me people one of two ways. Either they had some resources that they were ready to take to another level, like they're ready to create a legacy, or they don't know, they don't know what they're saving for. They were just told to save, 15% of their income. And now they're like, okay, well, what do you want to do with it? And they're kind of lost. And so I work with these clients, and I loved it because I did get to work on the purpose, and my essence is really helping people understand why they do what they do. What is your core purpose? How do you communicate with others? How do you work together? And how do you use your life experiences and your expertise to fulfill your purpose? Like, that's at the core of who I am. So I got to do that. And then I realized they started asking me to, like, well, you need to get certified as a financial planner. And I was like, well, that's not what I want to do. Well, you can do it. Sure, I can. But just because I can doesn't mean I should. And so this is where I actually, like, it was loud and clear when I was during my prayer time and when I was looking and considering, because it was a great opportunity. It would mean quite a bit more money. And here it is, like, I'm trying to build my business on the side, but this was definitely, bringing in the funds. And it was felt when I was like, okay, I appreciate the opportunity. But what you're asking me to do is not aligned with who I am and what God's called me to. So I completely stepped away from that business, that company. And yes, it was hard, because to seeing that income go from, a lot to zero, from the point of being able to have, do what I need to do. And then now it's like, okay, time to get serious with my own business. But I had to make that decision because I knew that though I could do what he was asking me to do, it was not aligned with what God wanted me to do. And I would not have been able to answer that if I didn't know my purpose, my calling. And I wasn't even as clear then as I am now. but I still knew that it wasn't right. It's because I did the deep work and I got to know myself. So I want you to take the steps. I want you to ask yourself the hard questions and look at, like, how do I get real with myself? And so what can you ask? What can you do to get real? And it's really like it's things I've been talking about. What are your core values? What impact do you want to make? What is God speaking in your heart that you haven't acknowledged to yourself yet? So I want to encourage you to get quiet for a few minutes today. Or next, if you're driving or cooking, but put it on your calendar. Give yourself 10, 15 minutes just to say, okay, who am I? What are some of the common themes? What are the highlights that God's been highlighting to you? What do I value? If I could do anything, if I could make any impact. One of the questions that I asked the ladies in the Vision Lab is, what do you want others to say about you at your funeral? I know it's a little bit of a morbid question, but it's seriously, this is let's get real, because we get to reverse engineer that. In order for people to say that then, we get to embody that now. So I want people to say that I put people over things. I want people to know that I deeply cared about them and would help them in any way possible. I want them to know that they mattered to me. And in order to be able for someone else to say that about me, that means I get to do the things to make them feel that now. And so the same for you. Just take some time and think about, what is it that you want from your life? Get real. Ask yourself these questions, and I guarantee that you're going to start to feel that authentic connection with yourself. And then you get to step into that, and other people will feel it as well. And so what layer? Think about your 3 layers of mirror. The surface layer, the reflective layer. What is your inner narrative? And do you have evidence that it's true, or do you have evidence that it's a lie? And my guess is you probably have a little bit of evidence of both. But if you get clear, you'll see that the lie is a little stronger, and it's actually a little distorted, because the mirror, the reflective part of the mirror, is always slightly distorted than the real thing. So that's why the 3rd layer of this, the true essence layer, is where we get to live and we get to breathe and we get to make decisions from there. All right. Well, I hope that this gets you fired up to just ask yourself 1 or 2 questions about who you are. And I can't wait to talk more about this. And I actually want to talk, I think I don't know. I don't know if I'll do it next episode or the episode after, but I'm going to talk about the fact that if we want to combat imposter syndrome, getting to our true essence layer, getting past our service and our reflective layer of this mirror is what's going to do it for us. Because imposter syndrome lies in the inner narrative. And so I have a whole podcast that I am crafting on that, because it's helped me so much that I know that it's going to help you as well. And so with that, I will see you soon. If you have not left me a rate or review, please consider doing that. Come and hang out. If this was helpful, reach out to me, DM me on Instagram or on LinkedIn, and let's chat. I would love to know if you ask yourself why it's hard to ask yourself these true essence questions. What are you afraid of? Because I guarantee there is so much compassion and grace waiting for you in that layer, and so much amazingness. This is the crazy part, is we have so much strength in this layer that we haven't embodied, we haven't cultivated, we haven't stepped into, we haven't embraced. And when we do, we are unstoppable. That song Unstoppable just played in my head. But okay, I'm going to go now, because you have your assignment. You know what you need to do. You know to go and ask yourself, go through those layers of the surface layers of what others see. And you can ask people, what do you see? What are my strengths? And what are some of the habits that you know that I have? The reflective of what are some of those inner narratives? What are your fears and the values that you hold? And those inner narratives that are the stories that are playing. And then ask yourself of what does faith mean to me? What is my purpose? What is my impact? Who am I at the core? All right, friend. Well, if you have not left me a rate and review for this podcast, I would really appreciate if you would. It would take 30 seconds, whether it's on Spotify. It's like 5 seconds on Spotify. And, but on Apple, if you can, leave me a rating review and then share this episode with a friend who you know is amazing and isn't connecting with her true self. So if you could do that for me, I would appreciate it. And I know she would as well. And I will talk to you soon. Choose joy until joy chooses you. And I love meeting with you every week. So thank you. And I will see you soon. Bye for now.